You're still watching Business Morning here on Channels Television. The Minister for Industry, Trade and Investment, Osunbani Adebayo, has estimated the cumulative investment in the 30 years of operations of the Free Zone Scheme in Nigeria at $20 billion. That's enough money to boost our foreign reserve. Now, according to Mr. Adebayo, in 2021, a Free Zone generated $250 billion in both foreign and local direct investments. That is $5 billion in customs duty payment and $65 billion in local import and backward linkage. However, records now indicate that of the 42 free trade zones in Nigeria, only 25 are active, with 15 of them operating in Zone A, 4 in Zone B, 5 in Zone C, and 1 in Zone D. And the issue here is the challenge of infrastructure. Well, we have to delve into this. Mr. Femi Awofala, the Chief Executive Officer of Brickstone Africa, joining us here in the studio. Good morning, Mr. Awofala. Thank you so much for your time.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm great. You're welcome. So this free trade zone, how effective is the scheme? Is it just on paper? Do you know them?
Okay, so basically, I mean, free trade zones have been existing in Nigeria for a couple of years. Way back when we had the Lekki Free Trade Zone that was inaugurated over 15 years ago and things. And the whole essence is basically to bring trade and manufacturing and processing under a one-stop shop so as to share infrastructure and be able to provide exports, right, easily for the participants in itself. Now, over a couple of years, right from even the military era, pre-1999, there have been more free trade zones, applied to, included in Nigeria. We have the Onne Free Trade Zone, the Calabar Free Trade Zone, and a number of things. But the key issue here is, what is the government commitment, to making those zones happen? Because at the end of the day, there is need for you to have power where you are providing your manufacturing activities. There's need for you to have mobility in terms of transportation, in terms of logistics, and a number of other things. So is it that the people who are meant to be in the free trade zones are shying away? Is it becoming more expensive to operate in a free trade zone and rather just operate in your own land area, buy your land and build your factory? Mm-hmm. So those are the issues that I think that government has not really paid clear attention to. But the key thing is that they are here to stay. We have the Africa Free Trade Agreement, which will help to, a number of African countries to have more capacity or more industrialization needs. So even apart from Nigeria, you're going to have more of these, trade zones located in different nodes in Africa. But the key thing about it is the fact that, are they competitive?
Yeah, because I think the idea of the free trade zone is to make it easier for people to do business.
Yeah.
So they're supposed to have, as you noted, power, infrastructure.
Correct.
That'll make it so you don't have to start thinking about how do you get the raw material from here to here. Mm-hmm. So perhaps you have even a chain of provider of raw material from one stage to the other. That's why I ask, how effective is this scheme? Because we know the Lekki Free Trade Zone, for instance, let's look at the road to that.
Yeah.
How good is that road there?
Exactly.
How convenient is it for manufacturers, to say, oh, I would like to locate here because at least I have infrastructure, I have power. I think they're still providing power for themselves.
Yes, they're still. Yes.
So, I mean, how effective is this scheme at the end of the day?
You can't, well, I can't really score it in a way, but I can tell you that the objective is okay. It's a good development, but it hasn't been that effective. That's just the first point of view. Because one, you still have more manufacturers who are meant to be in free trade zones, not locating in free trade zones. They are locating in their own industrial estate in Ikeja, in Apapa, in other areas in Ogun State and things, but they are still the kind of manufacturers or the kind of, let me say, tenants who should be located in free trade zones.
I guess the incentive
is not, so the incentive is there. But however, maybe the process. And okay, so let me just go into what I think the issues are.
Okay.
One is the fact that most free trade zones in Nigeria today they don't have a very strong business case for mobility. So the key thing is this. I'm bringing my goods and services, my labor, and every other thing to the free trade zone, even though there might be some shared infrastructure. But the road to get into the free trade zone is unmotorable. And if I have to finish doing my production, I need to export it. Now, there's no port. So there are only about 3 or 4 free trade zones in the country today out of these 15 or 50 you mentioned, right, that have port facilities. And if you're going to deal with trade, the first business case for a free trade zone is what is the mobility? How do people move the inbound and outbound logistics out of that zone? So if you have a free trade zone in an inland area that is landlocked, that doesn't have water, or that doesn't have a real serious access in terms of maybe air transportation, maybe it might be close to an airport and things, you are going to lack tenants. You are going to lack the viability you determine to achieve. Secondly is the fact that there are other free trade zones that are based on raw materials. So for example, because you have gas, you have a number of free trade zones in the southeast, on the south-south, because of the gas nature in itself. But at the end of the day, you also find out that the raw material is just in situ. The raw material is not available via a pipeline, is not available. So you are in the free trade zone, you have to now go develop a pipeline from about...
To connect to the raw material.
To connect to the raw material. That shouldn't be your business. So government should have looked at, okay, we're going to have a free trade zone here for energy producers, for people to produce fabrication, and they need gas, they're going to produce power and a number of other things. The government itself, as part of their incentive, needs to get the raw material to where the free trade zone is. The third thing which is really challenging also is the manpower. Because one is there are a number of specialized issues or specialized production that the free trade zones are provided, but do we have the manpower in terms of the skills to actually operate in a free trade zone as a producer of contact lenses, for example? You know, you probably still have to fly in. So when you go to some free trade zones you have in Nigeria, you have a lot of foreigners there. But you're like, why are we having free trade zones and we have a lot of foreigners in situ in the free trade zone when we should have, you know, the locals actually being built with capacity, being able to work on it in itself? So those are the 3 things that have not made it effective. The level of effectiveness is not yet there, because also is the fact that also the cost of entering a free trade zone, I mean, they charge in dollars. I'm sure you're aware, to even locate your application, to incorporate your special purpose, your special enterprise, your special zone enterprise company, because they have their own kind of jurisdiction in terms of special zones. So you also will have to have some level of foreign exchange, because they expect foreigners, or sorry, international investors, foreign direct investors, to come in. But sometimes in a free trade zone, you can be a local Nigerian company, and you feel that the best way for you to operate is within a free trade zone, and you are being charged in foreign currency.
Foreign currency. And you know, if we're talking about boosting our non-oil exports.
Correct.
Even if the minister is talking about making $20 billion, correct, I mean, if we do not have this infrastructure, then this may just end up being just a figure on paper.
Correct. I can tell you that for free, because the key thing, as we said earlier, is number one is that mobility. So Ogun State has a free trade zone, for example, inland, locked within the Shagamu Interchange Expressway.
I think they have gas working for them in that area.
Yes, but the gas is not in situ. That's what I'm saying. So the gas might be about 1 kilometer away. Maybe I think Shell has a line. But the question is, who is responsible for bringing the gas to the free trade zone? That's always what's happened. So they like say, oh, we're looking for investors. We're looking for people to come and develop the infrastructure. So there are 2 levels of, let me say, participation. One is, am I interested in investing in the free trade zone as a master plan, as a global entity? Or am I interested in being a tenant in the free trade zone and just do my own activity? We've had a number of interests in Nigeria over the last 10 years of people who want to tenant or who want to situate their manufacturing concerns within the free trade zone. But however, the free trade zone themselves don't have what we call a global developer who they will partner with to develop the whole infrastructure in terms of the roads, the power, the gas, the raw materials.
Isn't that supposed to be the plan of the government?
Correct. That is really where the government needs to come in. They need to come in such a way as to provide that enabling environment for that private sector developer to partner with them across the zone in its entirety. But the question now is this, is how much does the private sector want to do? How much also does the government want to do? Now, it's also a chicken and egg thing, because sometimes you're like, okay, who are the tenants who want to come to the free trade zone? And why should I develop this level of infrastructure? But sometimes when you look at the growth aspirations as a government, there are some things you just get done, because you believe that this is a good location, it has a seaport, It has good mobility. Let's provide 100% power there, even though we have like 10 tenants for now, right? But let's have that aspiration to develop. So that's political, or let me say, the economic decision making to say this is a very strategic zone. Come rain, come sunshine, we need, so like a Lekki Free Trade Zone, even though it's now coming to fusion because of the Dangote refinery and the ports are just being built and things, it's now you now start going to have the Free Trade Zone becoming, a more an attractive destination.
It sounds to me like you're saying that if the government is not able to, on its own, create the master plan, the environment, they can also partner the private sector.
Correct, yes.
Because, I mean, there's rent to be made from there.
Yeah.
So private sector wants to make profits, so
correct, exactly.
They can obviously make profit from the rent.
Correct, yes. And the other thing about it is the fact that even though for the private sector to come in, then the private sector needs to understand the economics of that free trade zone. So if you locate a free trade zone in a landlocked area, you yourself, you may not be able to bring out the economic viability of that zone because 1, there's no mobility, 2, there's no access to power, 3, there's no access to pipelines and a number of other things. So some of these free trade zones that are, or let me say special economic zones, so to say, that are created, they need to be looked up, they need to be looked at all over again and really confirm that can this zone be taken to the next level. Now, that doesn't mean you need to cancel the zone. What it just means is the fact you need to create what will be the mobility requirement. So if I have to come and produce here and produce my goods and services, do I have access to go into a port and export it to Tanzania, or do I still have to transport it down to Lagos and get to Apapa port before I export it? So the question is this, what exactly is the strategy behind the zone initially? Some zones, because of the mobility access or the mobility advantage they have, it's easy for them to actually execute on this number of things. Then also, you don't have issues of land issues. So a number of these free trade zones are already were land that were owned by indigenous people. Right. When I say indigenous, I mean the locals.
Locals, yes.
Sometimes you have the state government having acquired the land. The federal government is saying the land is still is for the state government. The locals are fighting and things. So if you do the due diligence among a number of zones, a number of them are in courts regarding land issues and land rights in itself. So there needs to be some level of clarity, because at the end of the day, if I'm situating my facility on a plot of land that is under dispute, right, then I don't have any incentive to say if there's a court judgment tomorrow and they say, oh, this land does not belong to this zone again, it belongs to this local family, and I have to go and pay them money again, So
if at all, they don't just tell you to quit and take your things away from that.
Exactly, yeah. So those are the things, and more importantly, I feel government, both this government and the new government or whoever comes in needs to really pay attention to how do we get Nigeria into these special economic zones, but in a more practicable strategy. So, for example, every state in Nigeria wants to have a free trade zone because it's a nice to have. It shouldn't be, right? You as a state can say, you know what? I don't think I'm landlocked. I don't have the necessary transportation infrastructure. I can't really be a zone. I don't think any zone will be viable here because of mobility. Maybe I should just be a production, a raw material play to say.
And connect to another zone and feed your raw materials into that zone.
Those are the things that, it becomes a political nice to have to say, oh, we have a free trade zone too and things. Then the issues of financing those zones at the master plan level, at the master plan infrastructure level, there needs to be some level of way to guarantee investors of their returns. Now, it could be things about, okay, you know what, we're going to bring in all manufacturing entities there, then the zones have to really also work hand in hand with people like IFRS and taxes. So sometimes there's still a bit of gray area because your employees...
Yeah, because they're supposed to enjoy some kind of tax holiday in the free trade zone.
But if you work in a free trade zone, where as an you still have to pay payee because you are moving from one... you are moving from your house to come and work in a free trade zone, you are still a resident of that community, of that state. So the state government wants to still charge you taxes. Secondly, the fact that you still have to pay some level of VAT because you're also buying goods and services. Maybe you might not pay VAT in terms of when you export and things, but at the end of the day, when you look at the numbers in terms of you operating not within a free trade zone, from a taxation perspective, you tend to be more advantageous for you to be out there just because you want to just meet the normal tax requirements. So the question now is, how much level of interrelationship do these free zones have with the federal inland revenue? In terms of, you know what, we are saying tax-free, it is tax-free. from A to Z. Your employees are tax-free, you're not paying anything, you're not paying any VAT, you're not paying anything. And that level of meeting have not really, come across, the level of like agreeing to both on the government level and the free zone. And because most times the free zones may be created by the state governments. So the federal government does not want to hear anything. Like, you know what, you guys are the ones doing your zone. You're on your own. You just pay my whatever thing. But it's also in the interest of the federal government for the state government to have a free zone. Because at the end of the day, it will still bring in production, it's to bring in the export potentials the government really wants at the end of the day. The other thing about it is also in terms of why a number of financiers don't really have much interest is these legal issues. Because at the end of the day, as a banker, as a lender, the major thing that you feel that the free zone brings to your table, right, is the fact that I have rights over the land in itself. So once you don't have that, it becomes a real challenge of moving forward.
Yeah, well, so looks like for us to get this $20 billion that the minister is talking about, there's still a whole lot to put in place and do. And it doesn't look like we're moving that way at this time, but we do hope that government will give it good attention, not just the federal government now. I mean, even the states, subnational, because that's where you have more of the land and more of all of that. All right, thank you so much, Mr. Femi Awofala, Chief Executive Officer of Brickstone Africa. Thank you so much, and we do hope that this conversation goes far so that we'll see the results of it.
Thank you.